Hey guys, you're watching Concept, and in this tutorial we're going to talk about C++ references. Before we go into C++, I just want to note one thing. C++ references are not the same as high-level language references. For example, blueprints are kind of high-level languages, and they have something like this. When you create a variable, you can put like reference to some object. That is not the same as C++ references. This function, actually pointers have this function in C++, and that's why I said in pointers tutorial that people interchangeably use reference as a word for pointers. C++ references have totally different function than references in Blueprint or any high-level languages. So let's get started. Now, references are fairly easy to understand comparing it to pointers. So let's say that we have int 32, which is my int and which is equal to 5. And we have int 32 with this and sign, which is my ref and equal to my int. So if you have this variable type and variable name and this and sign between them, that means that is the reference. So we created a reference and it is referring to my int. What does this mean for us? For example, we say my ref is equal to 25. This will also affect my int, not only my ref. So in this case, my int will also be equal to 25. And we say my ref is equal to 50. That means that my int will also be affected and be equal to 50. Now you will ask, why do we use references if we can just use my int and just say my int is 25, my int is 50? Why do we have to assign this reference? That is because the way C++ works, and we'll go next to the functions of C++. Now, how does C++ work? Let's say that we have function which is called sum function, and it takes two arguments, int32, which is a, and float, which is called b. And we have two variables, int32, which is my int equal to 5, and float, my float equal to 6.5. And we want to execute this function. We need to feed it with int and float. And we, in begin play, we feed it with my int and my float. What will actually happen? C++ will not take these arguments as they are, but it will create a copy of it. So if you can see int32a and float b, so in this case, similar and in pointers tutorial, so in this case a will be equal to 5 and also b will be equal to 6.5. It will not use those my ints, but it will create a copy which will be a and b. So if you have some function, for example, and you want to use that exact variable and you want to change it through function, you will use that reference sign. Now we will see in function how does that work. So let's say we have that sum function, and in that sum function we will say b is equal to 2 times b and a is equal to 5 times a. And we execute it on begin play, and we feed it with my int and my float. What will actually happen after this function? You will probably think that my int will be equal, because it's a, it will be equal to 25, because 5 times 25 is equal to 25, and b will equal to 13. But it will not be like that. In this case, it's only gonna affect a, so it will only affect a copy, the copy we made. So a will be equal to 25 and b will be equal to 13. But my int and my float will stay the same. So they will actually the same. So they will be the same, which is my int is 5 and my float is 6.5. So it will not affect my int and my float at all. But we want to affect it. That's why we use reference sign. If we use, for example, here reference and here reference, and we also define it here, that means that my int and my float will be directly affected now. Now it will all be the same. A will be 25 and b will be 13, that a. But as we said in the beginning, as a changes, it also changes my int. So in this case, when we put reference sign, also my int will be 25, just like in the beginning, and my float will also be 13. That's why we use references, because C++ creates copy if we don't use it. Now I will show you how to utilize and how it is utilized in Unreal Engine. Okay, how this is utilized in Unreal Engine. For example, the same thing I showed you before, you will see similar function in Unreal. For example, this get viewport size. If you see, get viewport size actually needs two arguments. Just to get it. Okay, so it takes two arguments, int32 and int32, and you can see that it has reference signs. That means whatever you feed it with, it will be changed. Why is this used in C++? Because if you can see this void, you can only have one return type. So it can be void, f vector, I don't know, integer, doesn't matter. But you can have only one type. But if you want multiple types, then you use references, because you know whatever it's fed with, it will be changed. In this case, for example, we will say my size or my screen X, my screen Y. And we need to define those parameters. So int32 my screen X, int and int32 my screen Y. Okay, so we defined it before we pass it. So after passing my screen X will be, for example, 1280, and my screen Y will be, I don't know, 720, doesn't matter. But it's just to show you that you can use it for outputs. So usually when you pass it by value, it's input. When you pass it by reference, it's usually output. But there's also const, so we will talk about that in other tutorial. One thing to mention, if you, for example, create in your .h file int32 reference, so my ref, this means that it's permanent in that .h file, in that class. So, for example, you say my ref is equal to my screen X. When you assign your reference, it cannot be reassigned. So it's not like pointers. Pointers can be reassigned, while references cannot be reassigned. That's why pointers in Unreal Engine are used for objects, while references are used usually in functions. But don't worry, because if you have some function and you think that this will be permanently assigned to that function, it will not, because every time function is created, it creates a new temporary reference. So you don't have to worry, you can use references as you wish and multiple times if they are part of inputs in function. Actually, they will be in that case kind of output. And yeah, don't mix, for example, int32 this and sign my ref2, don't mix it with and sign in pointers in front of a name of pointer. So it's not the same. So this is not, and this and sign between variable type and variable name is not the same than this and sign before pointer name. So this has to do with pointers, this is reference. Okay, that's pretty much it. I will talk about this topic more in pointers versus references. You've seen why we use pointers and why we use references. And if you like the video, please like and subscribe for future videos. Bye.